If I dropped you into the world of 100,000 years ago and asked what was most likely to kill you, you'd point at the lion. Confident, dramatic, wrong. The thing that actually wiped out your ancestors in droves wasn't crouched in the dark with teeth. It was smaller than a grain of sand. It had no eyes, no plan, and frankly, no respect for how heroic you imagined your death would be. You pictured a monster. What got most people was a bad sip of water and a cough across the fire. Here's the part that's going to bug you for the rest of the day. The diseases you're most afraid of. The plague, smallpox, the ones that built whole graveyards into history almost certainly did not exist yet. They couldn't afford to. So if the famous killers were missing, what was doing all the killing? We're going to walk from that campfire to the actual murderer. And along the way, we'll rank every threat you think you understand. The predators, the rival tribe, the difficult birth, even a single rotten tooth. And by the end, you'll realize the scariest monster of the Stone Age was never in the cave. It was in the drinking water. And a version of it is still sitting quietly inside you right now. Let's start with what couldn't kill you, because it's stranger than it sounds. Take measles. Measles has a brutal little business model. It burns through you fast, and if you survive, you're immune for life, which means it's constantly running out of customers. To keep going without going extinct, it needs a steady supply of fresh, never-infected people, and the estimate is staggering. Somewhere between 250,000 and 500,000 of them, packed close, with a constant stream of newborns to keep the virus stocked with fresh hosts. Now look at the Stone Age. People lived in small, mobile bands, often a few dozen. A virus like measles dropped into a group of 50 would tear through everyone in a couple of weeks, and then hit a wall, with nobody left to infect. From the virus's point of view, that's a terrible market. Same story for the others. Smallpox descended from an animal pox virus, and while the exact timing is genuinely debated, the firm evidence puts its emergence as a human disease within roughly the last few thousand years. Pockmarked Egyptian mummies suggest it was around by about 3,500 years ago. Plague is the clearest case of all. The bacterium Yersinia pestis split from its ancestor within roughly the last several thousand years. The earliest confirmed human cases come from the Neolithic about 5,000 years ago, and the flea-borne bubonic version from the Black Death is younger still, showing up in the Bronze Age. None of them were stalking anyone 100,000 years ago. These aren't ancient enemies, don't. They could are a side effect of us inventing crowds. We built the cities, and the cities built the plagues. So if the celebrity killers hadn't been born yet, something else was quietly doing the work. And it's not the thing on the movie poster. In fact, it's so unglamorous, you'd be embarrassed to put it on a tombstone. When anthropologists studied the few hunter-gatherer societies that survived into modern times, the same grim pattern kept showing up. In groups like the Hadza of Tanzania and the Juhuansi of the Kalahari, infectious disease accounted for roughly 75 to 85% of all deaths. Not lions, not war, infection. And not exotic, dramatic infection either, the boring kind. Respiratory infections were the single biggest killer in several of these groups. A chest infection a modern doctor would clear with a week of antibiotics could just run its course until a person drowned in their own lungs. Right behind it, gut infections. The diarrheal diseases from dirty water and spoiled food. To us, an upset stomach is a reason to cancel plans. Back then, especially for a small body, it was death by dehydration. So the apex predator of the Stone Age fit on the head of a pin and didn't even have teeth. A quick honesty note, modern foragers aren't perfect time capsules. They've been pushed onto marginal land and touched by the outside world, but the broad signal is hard to ignore. Without medicine, the microbe wins, and it had a favorite victim. The single most lethal period in a Stone Age life wasn't old age, and it wasn't a heroic mammoth hunt gone wrong. It was being small. Depending on the group, somewhere between 40 and 43% of children never reached their 15th birthday, and most who died went before the age of 5. A newborn walked into a gauntlet of infections with an immune system that had met none of them and no help of any kind. Which is the quiet truth behind that line you've heard 1,000 times, cavemen died at 30. They didn't really. That average got dragged down almost entirely by all the children who never made it. Clear childhood, and the picture flips. In a large cross-cultural study of foragers, the most common age of death for people who reached adulthood was around 72. So no, your ancestor wasn't planning his retirement party at 29. The Stone Age wasn't a world without old people. It was a world where the road to old age was paved with the graves of the young. Okay, case closed, right? Germs and dehydration, mystery solved. Everyone go home. Except no. Because there was another way to go that had nothing to do with catching anything from anyone. Sometimes, the threat was already inside you. And sometimes, it arrived on the end of your own tools. Picture the most boring injury imaginable. A thorn, a flint flake that slips, a scrape from a branch. To you, that's a Band-Aid. To them, it was a coin flip with death. Without antibiotics, an infected wound has exactly one referee, your own immune system. If bacteria got into the blood and triggered what we now call sepsis, the body's own defense could spiral into organ failure. Even today, with intensive care and powerful drugs, septic shock kills a frightening share of the people it strikes. 100,000 years ago, there was no intervention at all. A wound that turned red and hot was a quiet little announcement that you might have days left. The mouth was just as treacherous. A rotten tooth could become an abscess, and an abscess could leak infection into the jaw, the neck, the bloodstream, the brain. So yes, your most dangerous enemy in the entire Stone Age could turn out to be one of your own teeth, staging a slow coup from inside your face. Now let's finally deal with the threats you actually imagined. Predators were real, and our deep fear of big cats and snakes is an honest inheritance from millions of years as prey. But by 100,000 years ago, Homo sapiens was a cooperative, fire-wielding hunter, and a band with its wits and its spears was no longer an easy snack. Predation was a fading danger, not the main one. Violence between people is messier, and the honest answer is it varied wildly. In some groups, it was minor. In others, like the pre-contact Aceh of Paraguay, violence in the broad sense has been estimated at around half of all deaths. But that's an extreme on the spectrum, not the norm. And the deep record is too thin to average anyway. Only a handful of skeletons predate 50,000 years ago, so anyone quoting you a precise homicide rate for 100,000 years ago is, politely, making it up. Then there's the threat we never label as one. Birth itself. Human babies have large heads. Human mothers walk upright on a pelvis built for that walking, and the fit is famously tight. Attention anthropologists call the obstetrical dilemma. Just how dangerous it was in the deep past is genuinely debated right now, with some researchers arguing the risk has been overstated. But a hard birth with no surgeon and no way to stop bleeding was, for countless women, the most dangerous day of their lives. And here's a strange twist worth flagging very carefully, because the science here is genuinely unsettled. The campfire, our great invention, may have invited a killer of its own. One line of research, based on the molecular clock of modern tuberculosis genomes, argues that the bug first arose in anatomically modern humans roughly 70,000 years ago, possibly tied to crowding around smoky fires that irritated lungs and kept people in close, repeated contact. If that's right, a single carrier of an aggressive early strain entering a band of 50 could, by one model, erase the whole group over the following century. But I have to be honest, this is far from settled, and it's the more dramatic of two competing stories. A growing body of work using actual ancient DNA points to a much younger origin, placing tuberculosis's common ancestor only a few thousand years ago in the Neolithic, which would mean it wasn't haunting anyone 100,000 years ago at all. So treat the campfire theory as an intriguing possibility under active debate, not a settled fact. Either way, it's a reminder that even our proudest invention may have come with a hidden bill. And now the part that's about you, right now, scrolling on a warm couch. That ancient war never really ended. It just moved inside you. Your immune system, that absurdly elaborate defense network, is basically the scar tissue of 100,000 years of losing relatives to invisible things. The same pressure may even have rewarded looking after the sick. The fossil record preserves striking cases of badly disabled people who survived for years, which is hard to explain unless someone was feeding and protecting them, most famously a Neanderthal known as Shanidar I, who lived into his late 30s or 40s despite a withered arm, a crippled leg, and likely blindness in one eye. I'll note that these caregiving cases come mostly from Neanderthals, not our own line, and researchers still argue about how much they really prove. But the broad pattern, that groups who cared for their own tended to survive, is a reasonable read. Beating the invisible enemy was, partly, a team sport. So let's be honest about what the deadliest threat really was. Not a monster. A swarm of invisible ones, working through dirty water, infected scratches, struggling lungs, and the fragile bodies of children, in a world with no medicine to fight back. You are the end of an unbroken winning streak. Every single ancestor in your line ran that gauntlet of microbes and wounds and dangerous births and came out alive long enough to pass life forward. The fact that you can shrug off a stomach bug or take an antibiotic for a cut and forget it by lunch is one of the most radical breaks in the entire human story, and it happened in a heartbeat compared to the eons of struggle behind it. The lion was never the scary part. The scary part was small, dull, and everywhere. If this changed the way you look at a cut on your finger, hit like and subscribe. That way you won't miss what's coming next. And missing it would be a shame. All week, we're cracking open one truth at a time about who our ancestors really were and how far we've drifted from them. But the next episode is a special one. Picture this, an ordinary campfire, the same one your ancestors huddled around. And that fire, a single piece of burning wood, quietly rewrote the appearance of the entire human species. The shape of your face, your teeth, your skin. Without fire, you'd look completely different, and you'd barely recognize yourself in the mirror. How did a flame turn people into what we today call beautiful? That's in the next episode. After it, you'll look differently at both the campfire and your own reflection in the mirror. So hit subscribe and see you by the fire.